Light Yagami, a prodigy in the making for Japan, a man with an IQ of over 200, top of his class among all in Japan, on track to become an ace detective until a certain little notebook came to the human world. And despite Light's extremely high intelligence, he made one crucial flaw that would set him up for failure in the end of the series. And it may not be the flaw you were thinking. Let's discuss it. He would become Kira and rain justice upon the wicked and try to become the god of this new world, was a genius among everyone else, and pulled off many feats of great intelligence to dupe all the people that were trying to chase him down. However, even as a god among men, he was still mortal, and mortals make mistakes, and there is a crucial flaw that would bring Light's plan crashing down in the end. And a lot of people have a lot to say about what Light's biggest mistake was. What was his decision that cost him his life at the end of the day? Now, a lot of people say it was the decision to hand over the notebook to Taru Mikami in Season 2 of the show, which ultimately led to him being captured because Taru Mikami, as smart as he was, he could not even sniff Light's intelligence. And that ultimately made him make a mistake, which cost Light his life at the end. However, none of this is truly that consequential when you think about the root cause of everything, and it all starts with one man, FBI agent Ray Penber. Now, to set the stage for why Ray Penber was so crucial to the story of Death Note and to Light's biggest failure, we have to go and look at the past and look at how this entire investigation started, right? So when it's first discovered that Kira is bringing justice upon people and he's killing all the criminals of the world, an investigation is launched by the Japanese police headed up by L to find out the truth of these murders and find out who is the main cause behind them. And with some great investigative work, L was quickly able to deduce that Kira was in fact living in Japan, and not just Japan, but the Kanto region of Japan. Now, this is huge because it takes the potential suspect list from 8 billion plus people in the world down to a few million that are in that region. However, we're still dealing with an extremely large pool of potential suspects, so a few million people is really nothing to go on. So we had to dig deeper. L had to dig deeper into the situation to find out where exactly is Kira coming from. But now that they knew where exactly he was in Japan, now the search gets a little tighter, a little more focused. However, this is still too big of a population size to have a coherent suspect list and investigation, so this is where L pulls out his biggest deduction so far in sniffing out that Kira is a school student. And the reason he is able to deduce that is because of the time of day and the days of the week that Light is killing criminals. And Light is able to figure out that L knows this because he's able to hack into his father's computer, his father being Soichigo Yagami, the chief of the Japanese police and MPA. And once Light does this, now the suspect link shrinks even further because L picks up on this, and now L knows for a fact that whoever is Kira is related to the Japanese police in some way. Now, this is where Ray Penber comes into the fray, because once L has his suspicions about the Japanese police force and them leaking information to Kira, he does something pretty rash, and that is he goes to the FBI and he contacts them to send investigators to Japan in order to investigate every single person in the police force that is knowledgeable of sensitive information related to the Kira case. So this includes over 120 police officers and their families related to this case. Now, when you look at this, right, 120 officers plus their families. So we're dealing with, I don't know, say an average of 3 people per household. We're dealing with over 300 potential suspects. So that is still an astronomical number when you consider who's being targeted by the police. So obviously one of these FBI investigators out of the 12 is Mr. Ray Penber, who was investigating Light Yagami and his family, as well as Deputy Director Kitamura and his family. So now we have 2 families that are being investigated by Ray Penber, And during the course of his investigation, Ray discovers basically nothing. In fact, what Ray discovers basically implicates that Light is innocent, because during the process of his investigation, he makes several statements regarding Light and how he seems like he's just a normal high school student, right? He studies when he gets home, he does things after school, he hangs out with chicks and is dating, seems like a normal high school life. And then when Light had the setup with the bus jacking, Ray was at the end of his investigation, and he even states right before the bus jacking that all signs point to Light being innocent and that he was going to finish his investigation in a few days and report back to L. And you have Light in that same day having confidence that Ray has nothing on him and thinks that he has no suspicion of Light at all. So you have Ray, who says that Light seems innocent and he's going to report those findings to L. Then you have Light himself acknowledging that Ray has no evidence on him and is going to report back to L. And this is where the biggest mistake happens. Light decides to kill Ray Penber.
Farewell, Ray Penber.
Now, some people might say, well, that was a necessity, right? He had to kill Ray in order to avoid suspicion and to get him off his back. Wrong. Because like I just mentioned, Ray had no suspicion of Light. In fact, he had all the evidence of the world that Light was not suspicious or guilty of being Kida. So if Light was able to just hold off on his lust for justice and think about it for one moment, the killing of Ray Penber was a complete non-necessity. It didn't need to happen, because what would have happened if Light didn't kill Ray? Ray would have went back to L and said, hey, listen, man, I have all the information you need on Light and his family, and he seems like a normal high school student. He does this and that, which means that he's not suspicious, so that's where this investigation ends. And now, Light is no longer a suspect, and Ray finishes his investigation and he goes upon his way. However, once he kills Ray Penber, Light now puts the entire spotlight of the investigation on two families, his and Kitamura's. And the reason why is because once we find out that Ray is killed, L immediately goes into critical thinking mode and deduces that the person who killed Ray had to have been one of the people that Ray was following, because it makes no sense otherwise, right? Why would it be some random person that has no affiliation to Ray or the investigators at all? So now you're taking a potential suspect list of over 300 people and shrinking it down to two families. So we're talking about, what, 6 people? Something like that? So now Light becomes one of the chief suspects of the investigation, and this is where the dominoes begin to fall. Because even though Light has success against L throughout the show, killing Ray opened up an entire can of worms for Light to eventually be weeded out as the main Kida. Because this allowed L to put wiretaps in Light's room, his entire house. It allowed L to even visit Light at his college, which is the way that L is able to find out that Misa is dating Light, which again puts all the suspicion on those two characters, and it forces Light to try to prove his innocence. And how does he prove his innocence? He forfeits ownership of the Death Note over to Higuchi of the Yotsuba group. And why is that important? Because what happens at the end of the chase with the Yotsuba group and Higuchi? The Death Note is discovered to be a real thing. That's your smoking gun. That's the murder weapon. What does every investigation need, crucially? It's a murder weapon. And because Light was forced to try to prove his innocence by getting rid of the Death Note, it ends up in the hands of the police, who now know that Shinigami exists, and they now know that is the murder weapon that is used to slaughter all the criminals of the world, which is a informational fact that is used down the line by Nier in order to ultimately bring justice to Light, because they know all of the evidence, right? They know exactly how the Death Note works. They know the ins and outs of it. They know that Shinigami exists. So now it opens up an entire realm of possibilities to consider when hunting for Kida. None of which would have happened if Light just held off on killing Ray and allowed him to finish his investigation. You see, everything stems from that crucial point, because if he never kills Ray, Light never becomes a main suspect. He's never even considered, really. And the chances are that Misa Misa and Light's relationship remains a secret because you wouldn't have Elle snooping around his college and his house and all of that. And the Death Note never would have ended up in the hands of the police in the first place, which is what ultimately caused Light's death at the end. Because if you remember, how does Nier capture Light? It's because he's able to use the Death Note and the rules of the Death Note and the ins and outs of knowing what the Death Note does and how it works to his advantage to dupe Light at the end of the day by changing out pages of the notebook from Taru Mikami. And this is why I said that Taru's decision at the end isn't the crucial mistake. It all started with Ray and his investigation and the death of Ray, obviously. So, as brilliant as Light was, as much of a prodigy as he was, and as much as he loved to believe he was a god, he was just a mere mortal. And mortals are flawed creatures. And Light is no exception to that rule. And that was the critical mistake he made that ultimately unraveled his entire plan to become the god of this new world, and thus bringing a tragic closing to the story of Light and the story of Death Note. But it was a good run for Light. I mean, you had over 6 years of Kira's reign on the Earth, of him exacting his will and his justice upon the world. But ultimately, because of the mistakes he made, especially the critical one with Ray Penber, he was ultimately ousted in the end by the very people that were trying to hunt him down. So that's basically all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you thought of this discussion. Let me know your thoughts on Light's biggest mistake. Was it this? Was it Taru Mikami? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. And I hope you really enjoyed the video. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please leave a like, a subscription, a comment. It helps out a really small channel like mine. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace!